Well, hello again from here at Whitley Park. Spring has definitely sprung in these parts. Another wonderful day up here. Newcastle are training just behind the trees there. We asked Eddie Howe this morning about the big fitness updates with regards to Alexander Isak, Kieran Trippier, Joe Linton, Anthony Gordon. I'll insert the news at the top here because in this video I have asked for your help, your questions on my ex-social handle. Thank you for so many that came in. But yeah, with regards Alexander Isak, fitness-wise, it sounds okay. It sounds good. He's probably going to train today. The groin issue doesn't sound too serious. Likewise with Kieran Trippier. Joe Linton as well. He sounds even less serious. It sounds like he will be perfectly fine for Monday night. Anthony Gordon, now that would be the concern. He hasn't trained with the rest of the group yet after getting that nasty whack on his side, for want of a better word, away on England duty. Still heavy bruising in the area. He has trained alone. Don't forget the game is Monday. Still another 3 days to prove his fitness. But even if he is okay, I don't think he'll come in for Harvey Barnes regardless. I think the best we're going to see of Anthony Gordon is on the bench on Monday night. And that's the right call for Barnes, given how well he has played in recent weeks, that running the team. I don't think it would be right, especially not going back to his former club if Barnes came out. So that's the fitness news, that's the fitness updates. But one name I've already mentioned, Alexander Isak, well, he was the subject of the bulk of the questions that you sent in, and great minds think alike, because that's all I asked Eddie Howe about this morning too. Now my line of question wasn't dissimilar to one or two that you guys have sent in, and that's to do with Alexander Isak and his injury proneness, his injury robustness, whichever side of the coin you look at. Now I'm minded to think that I was wrong about Isak to a degree. Now, a couple of years ago at a True Faith event in town, right on the eve of the season, we were talking about Isak, and I sat there and said, he's wonderful, he's brilliant, on his day he's one of the best strikers in the world. I think I was right on that score. But then I said, I'm not sure he's going to be the striker who takes you back into the Champions League season on season, because for me, availability is the best ability, to borrow Anthony Gordon's quote. Now, to that end, Isak was missing games. His first season was plagued by injury. Even when he came back, he didn't really seem to have that mental toughness to a degree. He would come off early in games. He would play 4 or 5, miss 1 or 2. The evidence was there. Well, since then, and this was the question I put to Eddie Howe, the notion that Alexander Isak is injury prone, it's nonsense. It's a myth, and Eddie Howe agreed, and he's talked us through all the work they've done with Isak. He's got his own physio who comes in and out. There's a real attention to detail there, a real want to be available, and that's backed up by the numbers, by his availability. Only Dan, Burn and Bruno, who play every week it seems, have started more Premier League games than him this season. I touched on this the other night. Alexander Isak is now the only Newcastle player in the club's Premier League history to score 20 goals in back-to-back seasons. All of the replies when I tweeted that on Wednesday night said, what about Shearer? Yeah, I couldn't believe that either, but Alan Shearer did it 3 or 4 times, scored 20 goals plus in a season, but never in back-to-back years, and that was because of injury. So for Isak to do it, that does speak to this improved robustness. And he trains. Eddie gave us a fascinating answer. He said, to use that word again, there's a myth that if you go easy on the players, if you manage them, if you lighten the load, it gives them more chance of playing on a Saturday. He said that's rubbish. He said the players who train hard Monday to Friday and train every day, they're the ones who are then able to take that into a Saturday and have that physicality to impact, to execute what it is they've been doing on the training ground. He said it's the players who don't train, they're the problem players. Now, to touch on a few of the questions you guys asked, well, I think one was, when will Alexander Isak be able to complete 90 minutes? It's a bit of an issue. Well, okay, I get where you're coming from there, but he came off the other night almost to preserve his ability to start. On Monday, he felt a slight groin issue in the warm-up before the game. It's credit to him. Alexander Isak of a couple of seasons ago, when he felt a groin issue in the warm-up, might he not have cried off, for want of a better phrase? But no, he didn't play particularly well, if we're being honest, but he scored a goal. He put Newcastle on the way to victory. So yeah, that again speaks to that improvement, that change in mindset. And he is super professional. I went out to Sweden a couple of weeks ago to speak to guys there. Went to his old club, AIK, went into the academy, and they spoke of his journey. Perhaps when he was younger, when he was 14, 15, there was a laziness was the word they used about him at times. They got a hold of him at 16 and said, listen, if you want to be the player you can be, if you want to be the very best, well, you've got to change how you approach things. And he did. within 18 months, he went from being that player who was a slight cause for concern to becoming the youngest scorer in the club's history, to getting a move to Dortmund as a 17-year-old. You know, they called it an explosion. Well, something similar has happened here at Newcastle. He arrived and he was in, he was out. He didn't start in the cup final 2 years ago, and there wasn't uproar. When you look back on that now, you think, wow, Alexander Isak didn't start the cup final. Well, yeah, Callum Wilson started ahead of him, and at the time it wasn't a massive controversy. But when you see him now, hasn't there been an explosion, to borrow that phrase, an explosion here at Newcastle, where something again has just clicked? And it's no surprise being exposed to Eddie Howe and his coaching staff, and that elite mentality, that improvement they bring about in every player. Everyone says Alexander Isak is a good, brilliant signing, and he is, for £63 million. Wow, you look back on that, an absolute steal. But he might have been a bad signing under a different manager, a different set of coaches. This environment has actually allowed him to go on and improve and be the player we see now, coupled with his own application. And that's the point Eddie Howe made this morning. You know, it's rubbish. If you want to see an injury-prone player, he said, look at me, I was injury-prone. My record tells you that, you know, I was a player who did miss games. Alexander Isak, right now, he isn't. He is available. He is scoring goals. Yes, he's got this slight little issue at the moment, but that's okay. You know, players who do put their body on the line week in, week out, they will pick up those problems. But it sounds like he's okay. And to answer the question, no, Alexander Isak isn't injury-prone, and that is why the figures we're talking about, you know, the best players, 150 million pounds, well, they've got to play every week to justify that. And right now, that's what Alexander Isak is doing. Now, another question on Isak was with regards to his contract. Where is that situation at? What will happen in the summer? Well, again, you know, this is something I reported a long time ago. The idea that Newcastle were close to agreeing something with Isak. There was reports September, October time. That just wasn't the case. Contract talks were parked. They never really got into gear towards the back end of last season. They will revisit at the end of this, but again, I've said this so many times, Newcastle being in or out of the Champions League, it's almost entirely dependent on what they can offer Alexander Isak. If they don't make the Champions League, well, yeah, they probably can't put that zero, you know, turn of phrase, can't put that zero on the end of his contract that he wants and deserves. Then to that end, is there a decision to be made? Do Newcastle look at it and think his value is at an absolute premium, or do they say, no, you're going to stay regardless, we're going to get another year out, if you can get back in the Champions League, then we'll renegotiate? I think the mindset at the moment is absolutely the latter. They want to keep Alexander here no matter what. And so if they qualify for the Champions League, that then gives them a much better chance on every level. That's why the last video I did here earlier in the week spoke of the importance of this mini-season, the 10-game mini-season, to get back in the Champions League, which has now become 9, which if they go to Leicester and win on Monday, which they should do, then becomes 8 with another 3 points on the board. And that again talks to some of the other questions, you know, coming back to budget. Now, Eddie Howe, I can tell you this, Eddie Howe hasn't yet sat down with Paul Mitchell. They haven't had that big meeting where they identify short lists from long lists and hone in on exactly what they want. I think everyone's got a good idea. Those conversations would have been going on loosely, but in terms of the budgets, the numbers, what this means, what that means, who's potentially coming, who's potentially going, that's all still to be determined in terms of that big strategic meeting. But again, we've got a good idea. And what I'm sort of hearing back, again, with regards budget, the questions you guys are asking is, if they don't make the Champions League, I don't think the budget is going to be big. I really don't. Now, they're in a healthier position with regards PSR. Will they be able to spend and do so without worry, without concern of then having to sell the crown jewels down the line to meet a PSR deficit? Well, yes, there'll be something there, but it might only be without outgoings, you know, 50, 60 million pound, perhaps. If, you know, we saw that scenario a couple of seasons ago when I wrote that the budget without sales was 70, 75, and a lot of folk didn't like that. Well, it was true. It was the case. Again, this year, I haven't yet found in my sort of trawling and digging the exact numbers. I might never get the exact numbers, but certainly early indications are that the difference between Champions League and not Champions League, well, that is big. That is really big. And that's why I come back to these games are big right now. They are huge. They'll determine the future of the club in so many ways. The players who are already here, the players who might potentially come in. So, yeah, it might have felt a little bit flat on Wednesday night. after the cup final at times. In that second half especially, it felt as if it was drifting the way of the Fulham game when the away team really had a little bit more control and looked the more likely winners. So that Sandro Tonali goal, I honestly think we'll look back on that one day and might even regard it as one of the most important in the club's history. Well, I've jumped up here to a slightly different location to get away from the tractor down the bottom there. Yeah, a recurring theme, a recurring character in these videos. We do enjoy him. Yeah, Tony Mack asks me, what do I think the capacity of a new stadium should be and what will it be? Well, I wrote this story in my Newcastle Confidential column a few weeks ago that, yeah, plans have been made, a glossy video has been produced and the number being discussed internally at the moment, well, that is 65,000. Now, is that subject to change? Is everything subject to change down the line? Well, of course it is, but certainly for now, what they're working to, this is exclusively revealed, like I said, in the Daily Mail. It's a new stadium on Leazes Park, no overlap with the current site. It's further into the park, and 65,000 is the number they're talking about. Now, that is all built into a supply and demand model. It's to safeguard that demand. I've spoken about this before, the need to have a few thousand locked out. You know, you might not like the sound of that, but it does protect price. At no stage can they afford to have an empty seat. And I know there's a lot of debate about this, and when you see the numbers that turn up for the parade, everyone's saying it's got to go 80, 90. Well, no, it doesn't. They're two very different subjects, and I think somewhere between 65 and 70 is probably just about right. And 65, there's been that word for a while now that might just be the sweet spot. And certainly internally right now, those are the numbers they're presenting in presentations and around the glossy video done by the architects and everything else. And, you know, it all sounds super exciting. It all apparently looks wonderful as well, but we're just going to have to wait and see. But right now, Tony Mack, that's what they're working towards. That is what has been presented. Now, another question on a similar theme. Do I think that the owners will think that winning the cup and conference football only this season will be classed as a successful year? That's a hard question, because I suppose it depends on your interpretation. I think no matter what happens now, this has got to be a successful season. Of course, it's got to be. The scenes at the cup final, in what's football without enjoyment, without moments? Well, goodness, the enjoyment and the moments everybody took from the cup final followed by the parade, how can it not be a successful, memorable season? But is it a season which then allows you to go on and have more of those seasons? That's the point I would make. I think this season, in terms of what it's done for that enjoyment, the engagement, the iconic moments, the history made, absolutely it's a success. But what they need to do now in the remainder of the campaign is safeguard future seasons. That's the point I would make. So to that end, to only end up with conference football wouldn't be good, would be disappointing. I think that would be for me, for the owners, for Eddie, for the players, for everybody. So I hope in a roundabout way that does answer the question. Still so much to be determined actually to properly answer it. Now, Sean Longstaff, another question. Eddie Howe said this morning, he admitted on the record that his long-term future is unclear. Now, I think we already knew this. Now, Longstaff's contractor story I revealed was invoked, was extended. You know, it wasn't something where they sat down and announced and the player agreed to it. There was a big pay rise. Well, no, it was extended to 2026 from 2025 by the club to safeguard their asset, to ensure that they do get a fee for Sean Longstaff. Now, he might have gone in January. That was possible. It was something the club's hierarchy were exploring. I think Sean took the view himself that, well, why would I do that with a Carabao Cup final on the horizon? He actually very nearly got on. I was disappointed he was stripped to come on. And there was a late tweak there and Emil Kraft went on instead of him. I love Emil Kraft, but I would have loved to have seen Sean Longstaff get on. I think he deserves that for what he's done for the club. You know that I've been a big advocate of his over the years, but certainly beyond this summer, I'd be surprised if Longstaff is still here going into next season. I think there will be an effort made to move him on. The player might feel and might want that himself too. So can European football affect that, given the need for homegrown players? Well, yes, it can. It'll be a consideration. But to try and answer the question, to try and be honest, I would probably expect Longstaff to move on this summer. Now, another player, just to wrap up on the last of the questions here, another question, why isn't Will Asula getting more game minutes? Well, it's because Alexander Isak is fit to go back to the top of this video. He's playing well, he's scoring goals. And Callum Wilson now, it's almost slipped under the radar. Wilson's been fit for 5 weeks, so that's knocked Asula down the pecking order. But what I can say is the reports I'm getting back, they like him. he's improved. There's something to work with there, and I would expect to see the Willa Sula project continue into next season, and maybe during pre-season we'll see a little bit more of him. So at that end, to come back to my Newcastle Confidential column yesterday, where I exclusively revealed it looks like Newcastle are going to play Tottenham when they go on their tour of Singapore and South Korea this summer. Hong Kong was the plan. That didn't work for whatever reason. They did a couple of recce's over there. They've moved on. Singapore, South Korea. It looks like they could be playing Arsenal in Singapore, and then potentially Spurs and an All-Stars 11 in South Korea, which would be exciting. You know, taking Newcastle to new venues. I certainly hope I'm on that tour. That's something as well, which I know will appeal to a lot of you guys who do like to follow the club here, there and everywhere. So Singapore and South Korea, late July, early August, it's looking like. Now that is for down the line, the summer. The more immediate concern is Monday night down at Leicester. What they're going to do in terms of team news? Well, I think Alexander Isak will be fine. I think Joe Linton will be fine. Kieran Trippier perhaps maybe a little bit more of a concern. See how he goes over the weekend. Of course, they've got Emil Kraft who can come in there, but I would expect Newcastle to be pretty much unchanged, even if Anthony Gordon does prove his fitness, and that's the right call. And going to Leicester prediction-wise, come on, they've lost the last 7. They've only scored 1 goal in that time. I'm not even going to give a prediction. I think they will win. I think they've got to win. Everything less than a win would be a huge, massive disappointment. They've got to go there and they've got to do it, and that's what I'm expecting them to do. So thank you guys. I won't actually be at Leicester on Monday night. It's my little boy's birthday. My oldest boy, how old is he? Yeah, he's 9. So yeah, I'll be spending the day and watching the game with him. But thank you again for watching. Love it all. Love the interaction. The comments, please like, comment, subscribe, interact. It's brilliant. It really is. Now I'll be back next weekend, back here, when I'll be talking to Eddie Howe ahead of, what game is it? Yeah, it's the Manchester United game. Okay guys, take care. Goodbye.